Okay, so if you made it to episode 2, I think about 80% of people that started this have already quit. So give yourself a pat in the back for just making it to episode 2. You are now in the race with 20% of the people left that want to learn scripting. And in this episode, we're going to cover variables and data types. You may have heard of variables and data types before. I'm going to show you a quick example of a variable. And something that I want to reiterate is whenever you see me open a script, I recommend that you open Roblox Studio, pause the video if you need to, and script alongside of me. You can even change some of the wordings or numbers that I put, kind of make it your own, but this muscle memory that you're doing by opening Studio and scripting, it's going to help you a lot in the long run. It's going to help you learn a lot quicker than just watching the video passively. So go ahead and take an active role and follow along. So let's talk about what a variable is. A variable, you can think of it as a box that stores some sort of information or data. So right here, I named this box my variable, and inside of it, I put the number 10. So now anywhere going along in my script, I can bring up this variable that I set up. A good example of what a variable could be used for is something like a health bar. Let's go ahead and change this to my health bar, and we're gonna set it equal to 100. Now let's say somewhere along this script, I take some damage. So we are going to just comment this out, take damage, and we are going to now set my health bar to 20. You can see how having something like a variable is super useful when it comes to a health bar, because here we're able to set our health bar to 100, and then some action or some logic occurs in the script where we take damage, and then our health bar is then set to 20. Without a variable, we wouldn't be able to easily reference our health bar. So it's a little more complicated if we were to actually make a real health bar, but this is a good example of what you would use a variable for. And before we get further into it, I want to go over this local part. This local is just something that you do to initiate a variable within a script. Without getting too deep into it, it has to do with something called scoping, which we will go over later. But for now, get in the habit of always typing in local and then whatever you want to name your variable. It can be whatever you want, with the exception of some reserved things. And then you always have to tell it to equal something. So let's go over data types. That's the second part to this. So this right here, my health bar being 100, this is a data type. 100 is a number. And along with numbers, you can store words, sentences, objects. There's so many things that you can store. We're just going to go over 3 super important data types right now. So the first one we've already gone over. This is a number. And now the next one we're going to go over is a string. And I'm just going to name this variable my string. It doesn't need to be named this. This is just what I'm going to call it. And a string is basically any amount of characters, like words or even numbers. You can make numbers a string. But the way that, like, let's say I wanted to make my string 100. Now here, I'm not telling it that I want it to be a string, so it's going to be set to a number automatically if I only have numbers. But the way that I want to tell it that I want this to be a string is by using quotations. So a string is something that you can't directly do math with. It's usually used to represent things like names. It can be used instead to represent things like player usernames or pet names, for example. So let's go ahead and make this a name. We're going to do a real world example. So we're going to say my name, and we're going to type in CeeLo. And now the way that I know it's a string is because I put it in between 2 quotations like this, and it should turn a different color than if it's a number data type. And now the last data type that I'm going to show you right now is called a Boolean. So I'm going to name it my bool, and a Boolean can be one of 2 things. It can either be true or it can be false. Now, a good example for why you would use a Boolean in a game could be something like, let's say a player joins a game and a tutorial is put in front of their face and they want to skip the tutorial. So let's say they go ahead and press the skip button. Actually, let's backtrack really quick. Let's go ahead and create this skipped tutorial variable, and we're going to say false because by default, we want to say that the player is a noob and we don't want them to skip the tutorial. Let's say the player joins and they're like, oh, I played this game before on a different account. So here they're going to get the option to press the skip button. And after they've done that action, we can set this skip tutorial to true. So now we can store whether the person has by default either chosen to do the tutorial, or if they ended up pressing a button or doing an action to skip the tutorial, and now we can set this variable to true. But you can use this true variable to decide whether the tutorial plays for them or not. So that's just an example of how you would use each one of these data types. And I want to show you how they work with print statements, because in our last video, we went over printing, I believe it was your name. So printing works the same way. If we want to show a variable in the output, we can do that by printing out the variable. So let's do the tutorial, for example. So tutorial is false. So if we're going to delete this, and if we print out the tutorial variable, remember, this is just a box that holds data. And what is our data? Our data is a false Boolean data type. So when we choose to print this box, it's not going to print anything that says skip tutorial. It's going to print what's actually inside of the box. So as you can guess, what's inside of this is false. So it should print false. Let's go ahead and try. As you can see right here, it printed false. So now let's say we did some action where the player skips tutorial. And keep in mind, these are just comments. These obviously aren't part of the script. This is just an example of how logic would flow. So we set the variable to false. Somewhere along the logic line, the player skips the tutorial, and we're going to set their skip tutorial variable to true. And now let's print it again. And right before we print this, we're going to print another statement that says player has skipped tutorial. I can't spell. So let's go ahead and see what happens when we run this. So as you can see, it started out at false, then it says player has skipped tutorial, and now it's set to true. And both times we're just printing out skipped tutorial. So you can really see here why variables are important. We can use them to store values that we might want to adjust and use later on. So now I'm going to give you some homework. For each piece of homework, I want you to use AI. But the way that I want you to use AI, I don't want you to make it think for you. I want you to have the idea of what you want and express that idea or plan to AI and have it do all the typing for you. So in this case, I want you to create a variable that holds your name. So inside of the box is going to be your name. Name the variable whatever you want. And then right after you establish that variable, I want you to change it to a different name. And then I want you to print out the variable. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can get AI to prompt exactly what I'm asking for. And now I'm going to show you how I would do it. So now that we know what variables are, we're going to be specific in the exact system that we want. And trust me, guys, this sounds like, oh, I could just type it faster myself. That is true. You could just type this faster yourself because it's on a smaller scale. But once you really understand the fundamentals and the advanced concepts, learning how to prompt ChatGPT to build the systems that you have in your mind is going to be your best friend. And it's going to be the fastest way to build a game that you fully can expand on and understand. So let's start. So I'm going to say, make me a short script with no fluff. Make me a variable that holds my name and then changes the name to something else and then prints out the new name. So as you can see, we're going to copy and paste this script and let's see what it's doing here. Now we can actually understand what's going on. First, we're creating a variable named name, and then you have your name. And then here we're changing it to new name, and then we're printing that. So we really should see in the print statement, we should see new name. As you can see, it says new name. Now, I know it wasn't cool to use ChatGPT to do something like this, but trust me, it's going to be extremely useful. You getting used to commanding ChatGPT to build your exact ideas. It helped ChatGPT to be able to understand what we want because we're able to speak this coding or scripting language. We're able to tell it we want a variable. We could even tell it we want it to be a string of our name, and then we want it to print that name later on. Once you get into that workflow of thinking of exactly what you want and how it should be built, and then being able to express that to ChatGPT, it's going to build systems that you can understand because you're the brains of it, and it's kind of just like your worker that you can have type for you at an incredible rate. So that's going to be the end of this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions, and I'll try to answer them all.